Today we're going to focus on how Rhode Islanders care about each other and how Rhode Island's Jobs as Justice is going to play a role in this, and how every person at this table was specifically selected to help this process out. So all of you have a role to play, whether you like it or not.
Right? That was coming.
So you just giving out jobs.
I'm not giving out jobs. Listen, I come from Indiana. That's what you're supposed to do. So consider this like a campaign shape-up. Like I called everyone in. It's like, you are going to ring it. You are going to do this. Right? So I'm going to just tell you kind of where the process is and how I got to this process and why we're working on what this is and what the this is. Right? So when I was in high school, when I was about 14 years old, my father was a prize fighter. He also was a wonderful artist. He was a generous man. He was a really kind person. But he started to get sick. Prize fighters are incredibly fragile human beings. And also in the 30s, he had polio, which I only discovered after I started to take care of him. His care needs required me to no longer go to school. I had to work. So I dropped out of high school at 14. I worked at Louis' Diner. Who's familiar with Louis? Yeah, I was a slave in the kitchen of Louis. I had to render turkey from 5 in the morning till 9 in the morning, then serve from 10 till 1, and then prepare the potatoes for the next day till 8 at night. So I did that every single day, and I keep my dad in the restaurant with me, right? It's hard work. It was very, very hard. I had no idea what supports were available to me because I was a teenager. So most teenagers aren't good at thinking more than 6 months in advance, and I was no different than any other person. There was a few people who did help, and that kind of support network that evolved around this process is sort of what motivated me to think about Rhodycare, which is the name that a brilliant person in this room came up with, Jen, was available. One of the things that happened to me that was very important was my father's union at Brown. He was a janitor at a library, and he worked overnight at the Rockefeller Library. I see people shaking their heads.
Most of us are not allowed in that library.
Yeah, well, he was, right? So that was like a cool thing. Like an overnight person watching a library is like a dream job, right? Like you literally, you read all day. Like that's what you do. That's your job. His coworkers were the ones that pointed out that something wrong was going on. He was getting lost inside the library. He wasn't finishing his rounds, and it was the steward of the building that actually came to me and said, you need to keep an eye on your dad. And that's when I had to stop going to school. But the other thing that happened was the members of the union showed up at my house to make sure that my fridge was filled, would check the mailbox to make sure that there weren't bills that were sitting there, and that would have been impossible for me. We would have ended up homeless. Like, I know that. Like, there's no two ways about it. Leaving it to happenstance and leaving it to the existing social networks is real and important and needs to be bolstered, but leaving it to chance is not enough, and too many families are slipping through, are literally ending up homeless because of it. So that's on the elder care side of it. On the child care side of it, when I had my 2 beautiful children and had to put them into daycare, it was like, this is the most beautiful place, Delia. This is wonderful. And then having to write that check 2 times a month, and like, God damn, this beautiful place! This expensive little slice of paradise is terrible! I want it to go on forever, but I mean, it's more than tuition at your right side, right? At the end of the day, when you add up all of the care that a child requires, the conservative estimate is over $13,000. But the real estimate, when you factor in all the other care days that you need, the babysitters, the camp care, the after-school care, it comes much closer to $20,000 a year. Now, incomes in Rhode Island are not high. Organized incomes are higher, but it's not, the median is just not a real thing. So families are suffering because of it. And so I was able to see kind of both ends of this, and I saw the need for it. Now, other states have focused on elder care a little bit more for a couple of reasons. Our seniors, bless them, vote and they speak. And that's a really important factor. But our little ones, our newly arrived Rhode Islanders, do not speak, right? And the families are struggling to figure out how to put everything together. Like you have 10 months, in theory, to prepare for a child. I mean, really it's 6 months, but in theory, I mean, it's beyond the other math lies they tell you about pregnancy, but that was, And it's a short window, but it's a window that's full of crisis when it should be a moment when families are celebrating the arrival of our newest Rhode Islanders, right? Like that's what we should really be focusing on. And we can't. So families are having to make decisions about who works, who doesn't work, how the work gets done. One family member invariably takes a larger uncompensated role and another family member loses contact at the same time. Like those are the choices, and these aren't good choices. Choices made under economic pressure are never good negotiating positions, right? So increasing the strength of our brothers and sisters and our family members and our siblings in general means that we have to think of a better solution for this problem. Rhode Island has the oldest per capita population in the state, right? We have more elders than any other state, and they're coming back in droves. We also have younger children who are needing increasingly high levels of care and a shrinking pool of workers who can provide that service. Because wages are low, because the centers are not always the qualified centers, because of all of these other factors. So the concept is that Rhodycare becomes a trust fund that we can tap into as Rhode Islanders to help pay for at least a portion of that care. To cut some of that $14,000 down, maybe take it to 10 year one, maybe take it to 6. Maybe if we're really generous, get rid of it entirely. And for our seniors, it's the same thing. It's to provide that care, that 36 hours or that 24 hours of non-stop need that you provide, a break for a family to reconnect to their own lives, do the self-care necessary to go on as a caregiver, and do what it is that we have to do to support our family.